This tutorial is for you if you know some basic SQL and you have a family tree online or in a desktop application. I'm going to show you how to turn your family tree into a SQL database on your Windows or Mac computer. Then I'm going to show you how to use SQL to run queries and reports against that database. We'll build up from simple queries to a full report of all people in your tree. The first thing to do is to export your family tree to a GEDCOM file. If your family tree is online on Ancestry, MyHeritage, or Jenny, I'll put some links in the description below to tutorials for downloading the tree to GEDCOM. So now you have your GEDCOM file. The next step is to convert that GEDCOM file to a SQL database. And we're going to do that using a free version of the Roots Magic software. So Roots Magic has a paid version and then it has a free version it refers to as Essentials. I'll put the link here. Just go to rootsmagic.com, to Roots Magic, try it free. You don't need to put in any of this. You can just click that off. So click that download button. And usually Roots Magic say to take the 32-bit version, regardless of whether you've got a modern or an older version of Windows. Follow what they say, or else take the Mac version. And here is the installer. Accept the agreement, create a desktop shortcut, hit install. As you can see, it's giving you the option to purchase the full version. We'll just take the free version. Here is Roots Magic free version. I have a couple of trees already. If this is your first time using it, you're not going to see anything here under recent files. What you want to do is import the GEDCOM file. So we will go to import file under Roots Magic files. We are going to pick GEDCOM from these choices. And then you need to find the file. I look directly for this small tree that I downloaded. I'm going to click open. And then it's asking you to pick a destination for what will be the Roots Magic file. So click browse. You want to put it someplace where you can find it. I'm going to put it in the same place I have my GEDCOM file. And I'll click save. Here you can keep most of the formats. I like to take off web hints. Going to click OK. And OK on that. And here we've got this little tree. So now I have a Roots Magic tree on my local machine. And if you look up here, it's telling you exactly where it is. I want to go to that folder. If I order by date modified, here are the two Roots Magic files. We have these two files. One is .lst. You can ignore that one. This is the one that is basically, this is a SQL database. It's a SQL database, and the SQL database management system is an open source system known as SQLite. And because it's open source, it's not proprietary to Roots Magic, it means that we can actually query it using SQL query tools that can connect to a SQLite database management system, which is exactly what we're going to do. So I'm now going to close Roots Magic, just skip the backup, and then I'm going to make a copy of this file, hit copy, and I'll rename that to something like SQL Daily Family Tree, just to tell me that this is the one I'm using for running my SQL statements. So now I have my copy of this database, and I need to connect to the database. In order to connect to that database, I need to use software that will connect to SQLite database. There are several good pieces of free software that will browse a SQLite database. I've put two of the most popular ones on here, SQLite Expert and dbeaver. I'm going to use SQLite Expert, the personal edition, which is free in this tutorial, but you can do everything that I walk through now with any SQLite browser. If you have dbeaver, you don't need to go and install SQLite Expert as an alternative. So go to the SQLite Export website. This version here is the paid version with a trial. You don't need it. Scroll down a bit to get the free version, which is personal 64-bit or 32-bit for Windows. I will take 64-bit. If you're on a Mac, go with dbeaver. Click on that. And it's come down to my downloads folder on my personal machine. I will follow the wizard. You can keep all the default. I think I want a desktop shortcut. Click next and then install. And that's done. And here it is. So at the moment we aren't connected to any databases. Here is the SQL tab where we can write our SQL queries. So the next thing to do, and here's where things get fun, is to connect to our Roots Magic SQLite database. Different browsers will have different ways to make that connection. The SQLite Expert, File, Open Database, browse to where your database is. Notice that it's telling me that it can't find any databases in this folder. That's because it's setting the extension to be any of these types that it expects that will be a SQLite database. Roots Magic have their own extension, which is .rm3. So we just need to toggle this to all files. Now we see the .rm3 extension. This is the one we want, the SQL daily family tree .rm3. Select this, click open. And if you're following along, at this point, you're probably getting excited because here are the list of tables in your family tree database. So this is where we want to get to for our first SQL report. So we have a list of all persons in your family tree, given name, surname, their birth date details, so the year, the month, and the day. Where we don't have the month and day details, just putting out a blank, we have the birthplace, and we have the death details, so we have death year, month, and day, the death place. Once you've got these details, you can do some really interesting reports based on this person list. For example, you can do counts of the surnames to find most common surnames in your tree, the least common surnames. You can do various reports on timelines, and you can do also various reports by parsing out place names. But it all starts with getting person lists, and that is what this tutorial is about.
If you just want the SQL script and don't want to follow the tutorial on how to put it together and how the tables relate to each other, that's fine. You can download the script for free. There's a link in the description below to our Gumroad store where you will find two versions of the script. This version here, click on that version if you just want the free version. We also have a souped up version of the same report but with the parents. So we've included the name of the person's father and mother. Not as simple as it sounds, for the price of a pizza. So choose a version, click on I want this, and you'll get what you need.
So as you run your eye down the list of tables, you may be thinking, where do you start? And a natural start would be, well, if I want to list out all the persons in my family tree, this person table could be where to start. So in terms of the SQLite GUI, when you click the table to select it and switch the tab to data, it shows you the set of records in the table. You can scroll down to the end. I happen to have 534 persons in my tree. I know this from doing a count on my tree in Ancestry.com. So this is definitely the list of persons, but when I scroll over to the right, I've got a person ID, I've got this unique GUID, which isn't particularly helpful to me at the moment. Not seeing anything that looks like a name. So this may not be where I want to start. I'll give you a solid clue here. Take a look at the name table. So we have a person table, we have a name table. What's the relationship between name table and person table? In the person table, I'm not seeing a name ID. In the name table, I'm not seeing a person ID that would link those two tables together. It's not obvious how to link them. I'll tell you right now that this owner ID in the name table corresponds to the person ID in the person table. So let's look at putting together a query. So select star for now. I'll go from the name table. I will join it to the person table on person ID in the person table to the owner ID in the name table. I will take the given name or the given field from the name table. I'll take the surname and I will take the gender from the person table. Let's see how that goes. Down here, execute SQL. Don't make a very easy mistake to think is this big blue button here is execute. It's not. Leave it alone. It's this button down here on the actual SQL tab window itself. So we'll execute that. And now you can see the list coming back. I have given name, surname, I have a gender, and I can see that male is 0 and female is 1. I can infer that from the data. If you're looking down at this info here, where it's saying that we've got at least 512 records, in order to get the full count of records, we can scroll down to the end, and then it's telling me I have 536. 536 is 2 records more than the number of people in the person table, which tells me that there is more than one record in the name table for one or more records in the person table. But I will tell you that for 2 of the persons in my ancestry tree, I have created an alternative name fact for them. That person went through a name change, or I created a separate name to accommodate a better known nickname. If you don't set up alternate facts in your family tree, then you're probably going to have the same number of records in the person table as in the name table. And you usually won't need the person table in your queries unless you want that gender field. If you use lots of alternate facts for nicknames, for example, for many people in your family tree, then your name table could be significantly larger than the person table. In that case, then here's my bonus tip for your person list. Unless you want to see a row per nickname in your list of persons, let's have a look again at the data, the name table. I'm going to scroll over to the right. And you see here a column called is primary. If you have several names for a single person, one of them should be marked as the primary or the main name. So you can add a filter to your queries on the name table that looks like this, where NT is primary equals to true or 1. And that will give you a single name per person. The basic person list we can get from just doing a select from a single table, which is the name table. So here we have from my tree, I'm pulling out the first name, or the given name, the surname, and birth year and death year. You may be wondering, why is the birth year and the death year in the name table? The birth and death date details are actually held elsewhere. We don't have a month or a day in this name table. We just have these 2 fields, birth year and death year. They're just added in as helper columns. But just having the birth year and the death year isn't good enough. I want the month and day as well. So, birth details. The birth details are held in a table called event table. So these are the events, not just the birth details, a lot of other details in here. I'll do a select star from the table. I'm seeing an event ID, some kind of type category. The owner ID that matches up to the person ID in the person table. And even more usefully, it matches up to the owner ID in the name table. We have a place ID. We'll just kind of keep sight of that. But here we go. Here we have a date. The actual date starts where we see 1971. This person, that's the year. We have 01, which is January, and we have 16. So that date is 16th of January 1971, and that represents something to do with that person. But we don't necessarily know that it's a birth date. It could be a marriage date or a burial date, right? So what we need is a lookup to see, well, what category of event is this? The categories are held in this table called the fact type table. Just do a select star on that. It's much shorter. There's only 73 records in here. And this is the type of categories that are in the event table. So you can see that first one, fact type 1, is birth. Then we've got death. Then we've got all these other fact types. So we've got christening, burial, cremation, blessing, adult christening, and so on and so forth. To get the birth details, I want to extract from the event table only events with a fact type of 1. The next problem is that if I scroll to the right, I don't see any field. I'm just looking at the headers here. I don't see any field named fact type ID. Again, the names don't match up. So what's here in the event table, which is called event type, that is the match on the fact type in the fact type table. So knowing that, that means I can start putting together a useful query. So I'm going to the name table and I'm getting the given name, the surname, and I'm getting those 2 handy shortcut year details. I'm joining to the event table on, in this case, the columns do match up on the owner ID. And then I'm joining from the event table to the fact table and I'm joining on the fact type ID to the event type column in the event table. So let's take a look at what this gives us. Let's take this individual here who has two events, and I can see that one of those events is a birth event. One of those events is a death event for a particular date. But I'm also seeing that the years match up, right? So 1949 here, 1949 here for the birth event. Then for the death event, we've got 1972 here and 1972 here. It's a nice check for me to tell me, okay, that join is looking good. That date field is a bit of a pain to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out this part here. I'm doing that with a substring. Now, substring just means take that field, and I want the sub part of this field here. I want to start at position 4. So we've got D is 1, dot is 2, plus is 3, and then the number starts at 4. The format here is YYYYMMDD. That's 8 characters. This will just make it a little bit easier to read. That's actually quite useful for sorting, but I would like to break up that single date into separate year, month, and day. In order to do that, I'm just going to scroll down. Notice here where I have Mary Cassidy, birth 1882, and then I've got zeros. Well, zeros means that if I looked at my tree, I see a blank in the month and a blank in the day. I don't want to display zeros in my report. So here's what I'm doing. I'm doing a substring here, and I'm going to say, give me the first 4 digits, that's the year. Then take from position 8, which is the start of the month. For the next 2 digits, if it's 00, then display like an empty space. If it isn't 00, then I am actually going to display whatever is in the field. Similarly, I'm shifting on to the start of position 10 for 2 characters. If that's 00, then display empty space. If it's not 00, then display what's in there. We'll give it a field name, day. And there you see I now have year, month, day, and if I scroll down, I just have empty space where I don't have the data that I want. Now I want to isolate the birth details. I want a specific query that says, give me the birth dates for these individuals. I don't want all the other dates. I'm going to add a filter, a where clause, on the fact type record. You see it's here, name. I just want to filter it where it's birth. And here is where we're going to run into our first problem. I just run this, hit execute SQL, and what I get is an error. And depending on what browser you're using, it'll either be a pop-up that looks like this or it looks a little bit different. But what it's going to give you is a description of what the error is. And that description is the very cryptic no such collation sequence RM no case. RM stands for roots magic, no case. What it is that when dealing with characters, string in the database, roots magic has to deal with different languages, different alphabets. For example, it has to deal with the French accents. And it does this with its own proprietary code, and they call their piece of code this roots magic no case. We don't have access to that. So what we're going to have to do is tell our browser to use an alternative code or collation sequence that the database does have access to. The way to do that, I'm just going to click OK, is that I'm giving an alternative collation sequence, which is the standard no case, instead of that roots magic no case. And this is how I'm fixing the collation error. So if I run this query, let's see what happens. Aha. Now I get the result set. And notice that this is only birth details. Also notice that there's only 488 records here. I mean, I don't have birth details for all the persons in my tree. As we build up our queries, you're going to see this a lot, the collate no case. One of the reasons I instructed you to use SQLite Expert is that there is a way of installing an extension to SQLite Expert, which means that you don't need to put this in all your queries. I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial. I will give you details at the end of the tutorial about more on this, but for now, I'm just going to use the syntax collate no case because this works with every browser. The next thing to look at is I want the place name. So you're born in a particular place, you die in a particular place. So let's go back to the event table and notice that before we were looking at the dates, but we also saw that there is this place ID. And if you're thinking that it might be handy to take a look at the place table, you'd be right. Let's do a select star in the place table. Now, if you're thinking, oh, I must have a very wide and dispersed family because These are a whole lot of different places. These lower number places where we're starting at 1, they're not my tree. Roots Magic in the software has some extra functionality where it needs lots of places to run various reports. What we need to do is scroll down, and here we go. These are places from my family tree. So now we want to link the place table and the place ID to the event table. So now I'm going to extend the query that I've just built up. You should recognize the first part of this query where we're getting the names, we're getting the birth date details, but now I'm joining to the place table. The place table is joining on this place ID column back to the event table, and I'm going to pull out the name field from the place table, and I'm going to give it an alias. So I'm going to call it birthplace, and I'm going to only pull out the births, and I'm going to have my collate no case here to avoid error. Just run this. Now we have the details that we had before, and now we've tagged on this birthplace as the final column. Although the data seems to look good, there is one problem, and it's an important problem. We are losing data. Take a look at the record count down here. It's saying we have 479 records. If I go back up to the query, so without that join to the place table, 488. We've lost 9 records in our new query, and we do not want data loss. Let's take a quick dive into this. I'm going to give myself another SQL tab. SQL, new SQL tab. I am going to copy this, and I'm going to give myself count just to confirm that was 488. Then when I grab the extended query with the inner join to the place table, give myself a count 479. The problem is that I have birth details where my tree doesn't have any place name details. Key to solving this problem is not to have an inner join, to replace that inner join with a left join. I will explain that, but first I'll do it. Left join to my count, showing 479 before I run this, execute this with the left join, and we're back up to 488. The inner join here is saying, show me all the rows where I have a matching record in the place table on the place ID joining to the event table. By using the left join, it's saying, get all the rows in the event table, whether or not they have a matching record with the place ID in the place table. So it's optional as to whether there is a corresponding row in the place table. So what I'm going to do with this new knowledge, I'm going to go back to my main query, and I'm going to replace the inner join here with the left join, and so that gives me my 488 records, and I'll show you what place name looks like. We'll just scroll down. See, here we've got a null, and here we've got a null. Now, I don't particularly want nulls showing in the report, but I'll leave them there for now. So having got the birth details, I want the death details. So how do I get the death details? Well, it's the same query as above, but this time I switch the category from the fact type table, this name field. I'm going to switch it from birth, change it to death. And here we have the details that I want. But this time I have the death year, death month, death day, and then joining to the place table, I've got the death place. And now I don't want to have 2 different lists. One list where I have the birth details and one list where I have the death details. I want to combine them into a single row. Let me give myself a bit more screen room for this query. And I'm going to start from the lowest level. This query here should look pretty familiar. We're getting the birth details. In this case, because I got a subquery, I'm going to have the owner ID here. You notice I don't have the name table in here. So what this is going to give me, if I just run this execute SQL, that is going to give me this. What we expect: birth year, birth month, birthday, birthplace. Crucial thing is that I'm putting the owner ID in this subquery. So that gives me the birth details, and I have the almost exact same subquery a second time, but this time I'm getting the death details. So I'll just scroll back up again to the first subquery. I want to join this subquery to the name table. So my outer query is the name table, and from the name table I'm getting the given name and surname. Then I'm joining to the birth details. Where I've got the owner ID in the subquery, I'm aliasing that subquery as BD for birth details. And then I'm joining on the owner ID in the subquery to the owner ID of the name table that is the outer query. And again, I'm doing a left join because I may not have any birth details for a specific person. So similarly, with the subquery for the death details, I'm giving a different alias to that subquery. I'm giving it the alias of DD, and then I'm joining back to the name table on the owner ID. And once again, I've got a left join. If I run the query and then we just look at the columns I'm looking for the given name and surname from the name table. From the subquery that is the birth details, you can see what I'm looking for, and for the subquery that is the death details, you can see what I'm looking for. So let me run that entire largish query, and now I've got a much wider table. I now have it in a single row. I have the birth details and the death details. But you notice, well, I have blanks, but then it's not as clean as I want. I sometimes have nulls. In this particular row, I've got a name, I've got birth details, but when I do the left join to the death details, there is no death details at all in my tree. If I'm going to copy this to a spreadsheet or to a PDF, I don't want to see null, 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 null. I'm just going to extend the query that I have to take care of the nulls. The subquery remains the same. What's different is I'm going to give a special treatment to the fields that could be nulls. And I'm using this syntax here, coalesce. What this means is whatever data that I've got in the birth year, if it's a null, replace it with a empty string. And I just use that function on all of these fields. If I run this query and show you, I'll just scroll over. So we've got the death details because that's where the nulls are appearing. And you notice that I'm not seeing nulls now, I'm seeing empty strings. Well done for getting this far.
This YouTube video is a shortened and simpler version of Lesson 1 of our online course on how to use SQL to analyse your family trees. The course is based around at least 10 SQL projects where we build up queries to run useful SQL reports on your family tree database. Here's a course breakdown. You've already worked through creating the person list. The full version in the online course also includes getting further details such as the names of each person's father and mother. Lesson 2 involves creating a surname frequency report, which will give you insights into the most prominent family lines in your tree. Lesson 3 shows you how to parse the addresses for the birthplaces and death places into manageable pieces for further analysis. That would be pieces such as the town, state, and countries into separate fields. Once you've separated out the addresses, Lesson 4 builds on this to create frequency reports for state, towns, and counties. This will let you identify key locations in your family's history. Still working with locations, Lesson 5 gives you the At This Place report, where you learn how to create a list of all the family tree events, births, marriages, deaths, etc., whatever you've added as facts to your family tree at a given location. Then we move on to provide a similar report of family tree events at a specific date. Lesson 7 involves doing some data cleansing on your family tree. So we show you techniques and queries to find duplicate individuals in your tree. Lesson 8, we look at some classic age issues. That would include individuals whose birth and death date mean that they must have lived 170 years. So something's gone wrong in your records. Lesson 9 is a gap report where we will identify missing details in your tree. That would include married women without a maiden name or all the people without a death location. Number 10, we've put this towards the end of the course because it's probably something you want, which is to show the ancestral lines, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, etc. That's a tricky SQL challenge, which we will show you how to do. Once you've got your ancestral lines, we then look at the ancestor gap report. What we're looking for here is branches and lines where you're missing great-great-great-greats. So if you're really interested in this course, it's not quite ready to launch yet. We'll put a link in the description below to where you can pre-register for the course for free. We just need your email, and we will send you notification of when the course lessons become available for purchase.